Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Turning In podcast. Amy and I today spend time speaking with Jory Agate. Jory has a ton of experience within the IFS community as well as within communities as a whole and working with couples and people who are in relationships. Today, our main topic of conversation is about rupture and repair in relationships and what a proper, meaningful repair can look like. I hope that you enjoyed this episode and every episode as always, and we will go ahead and get right into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Turning In podcast. Today, it is me, Megan Jones, as usual, here with Dr. Amy Crawford, and we have a lovely guest on, Jory Agate. Welcome, Jory.
Good to be here.
Yes, thank you so much. So Jory is a certified therapist, lead trainer, and clinical consultant through the IFS Institute. She also has a private practice in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I always get the MA states, the MI, the MA states all mixed up. So Cambridge, Massachusetts. And Jory, you have a ton of experience in general in the clinical field. But you also do, workshops on DEI and intercultural competence and ASL. You've got a couple with, Fatima Finney, and you seem to specialize in ASL within your private practice, which is really rad and unique. I'm excited, hopefully, to hear maybe a little bit more about that. Today, our topics are going to be a little bit different than that. Talking about rupture and repair, intent versus impact. We just did a podcast. Our last episode was actually on IFS and dating and self-led dating. And so I think the timing of this is pretty cool to talk about more relationship as it relates to IFS. First things first, though, Jory, I want to hear what do you love about IFS? Like, what drew you towards IFS? Because you had a whole career prior kind of to getting into this whole realm.
Yeah. So I did. My first career was in ministry, and I was a Unitarian Universalist minister for 20 years. I'll also say I had a little mini career in sign language interpreting and deaf education. I did that throughout college and graduate school, and I was in the Peace Corps doing deaf education. So I've always had that as a kind of secondary career, if you will, and it's also impacted my primary careers as well, both in ministry and now as a psychotherapist. But I got into ministry because it was I grew up pretty rough childhood and really got the message that I wasn't okay. And when I got involved in my church in high school, it was kind of the first place I got the message that I was okay. And that really was the source to my call to ministry, wanting to be able to create communities that gave other that kind of healing message and create communities of transformation. And I did that for 20 years. And I did have a strong commitment in religious education and working with kids and families, making sure that I could deliver that kind of message to folks. But, I still had my own kind of childhood trauma history I was wrestling with. And when my kids got to be the age that I was, when a lot of the worst trauma had happened to me as a kid, I realized the way I was reacting to them was not so much about them, but about me and my history. I got back into therapy. And as luck would happen, I got in with an IFS therapist. And so my journey as an IFS client was so transformative and healing internally that it really shifted my calling. And particularly as I gained in my experience, I went and got trained as in IFS while I was still a minister, which helped me in my ministry, I will say, definitely. But as I got more tools of IFS, I wanted to be able to help people do that deeper transformational dive than you get to do in ministry. So I went back to school and became a psychotherapist and continued staffing IFS trainings and eventually became a trainer. And so now I'm kind of living out my calling, offering this tool of transformation to others, which to me is really an extension of my call to ministry. It's taken a little bit of a different form, but I feel as if they're all related.
Absolutely. That's actually really cool, and I love learning that about you because you sort of have, I mean, it sounds like an innate calling to wanna create that I mean, you just said it, that sense of community for people that I think a lot of us really yearn for and long for and maybe have a hard time finding, and for me, I think of IFS as creating that community, like, internally and that trust internally, and you've really gone through the realm of, like, with your career in ministry, creating that and then learning more and gaining a level up through IFS and being a practitioner and then going for psychotherapist. You can, like,
Yeah.
really like, you've gone through the realms of, like, deepening and deepening and deepening and
Yeah.
deepening. That's really cool.
Yeah.
But I
And
hear hope, and I keep hearing hope. It's like
Yeah.
you needed
yeah.
some hope, and you
hmm
found hope in a religious community, and then you gave back in that way. Yeah, so like hope and transformation is the theme I
hmm
keep hearing, which is pretty beautiful.
Yeah. And definitely the hope as well as the what you were saying, Megan, around the connection that we all um, strive for, need to survive. But of course, the message of IFS is we need that connection, or even we can't really succeed in getting that connection externally until we find it internally. And definitely, IFS gave me that internal connection between myself and my parts. And once we have that, of course, the 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 ability then to create those connections externally is also what we need to survive, which I think has brought me to a real passion of this current topic we're here to talk about today, which is the rupture and repair. Because, if you can't figure out how to make repairs in our relationships externally, you'll never be able to sustain those connections.
Well, and we're all in relationship with one another in some capacity or another.
Mhm.
And the reality is that we're not perfect. So there will always be some sort of tension, conflict, rupture. And so learning how to repair that on whatever spectrum of relationship you're in, I think is vital to having the connection. So it really comes full circle what you're saying.
Yeah.
um I want to ask a quick question, and you do not need to, divulge any sort of personal information by any means, but you mentioned an interesting um, kind of dynamic while you were doing your intro about how when your children were of a certain age, it kind of, excuse me, had a tickle in my throat. It kind of triggered your own response and reaction, which I would assume therefore increased the tension there. So, in starting your IFS journey, was it kind of that initial connecting internally that helped you through that journey? Woo.
Uh, oh, it feels like such a complex question. Um, I know that the healing I did through IFS made me a better parent, made I think improved my relationships with everybody. But I was kind of cursing and kicking myself that I didn't have those tools, that understanding earlier in my kid's childhood.
Yeah.
Because because I do think getting differentiation from our parts and understanding self is one of the greatest gifts IFS has given us. And so, yeah, I'm not sure if I answered your question again.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. And I was in the middle of having like a coughing attack as I'm trying to ask it. I think it does. I think, the main thing on my mind in asking that goes again full circle to what you were saying as far as having to create that connection internally and sort of understand. And I will bring this back to rupture and repair, but it's like understanding where that rupture and tension is coming from internally first to be able to externally go about, apologizing or, creating the connection again.
Well, to me, that's the great gift of being able to do this. And we cannot succeed in connecting to others unless we can actually unblend from those parts within ourselves, because it's our protective parts. When we have an interaction that's kind of exploded, what's happened? Something happened. And if we in any way have our exiles get activated, in some way get given the message, you're not okay, you're bad, you've done something wrong, you're no good, you're too much, whatever those messages might be that are coming at us, we know our protectors are just going to get totally activated, and they're going to respond with defense, shutdown, shaming, blaming, either internally or externally, blaming the other or blaming ourselves, whatever it's going to be. And we know protectors invite protectors, and you just get a protective escalation. Anybody who works with couples see this, or parents and kids see this. And of course, the way we foster connection is helping unblend from those protectors, respond from self. And of course, we're best able to do that when we can actually do the healing work to heal those exiles, so that when somebody kind of drops something on us, it doesn't land in that place of, oh, I guess I am bad. I guess I am no good. I guess I am too much. No, we know it's, ooh, ouch, that hurt, but I know I'm still okay, because I am okay. I can still love myself. I can still be with any vulnerable parts in there. And now let's see if I can respond to that person from the place of self, so that maybe we can have a better interaction here. Or maybe I can let them know how that landed on me in a non-shaming, blaming way, or without me kind of running in the other direction or shutting down, or all those common protectors we have when we encounter conflict.
Yeah, and I think I mean, obviously, I knew we would go there. I'm just really grateful that we're emphasizing that we have parts, the people we're in relationship with have parts, and I think sometimes, strangely, we forget that. Especially in IFS, where it's like, oh, I'm working with my parts. Well, yeah, if I've got a boatload of parts online, guess what? The person I'm relating to also does, right?
Yep.
And so we can't control their parts. However, what we can do is help manage who's showing up for us in response to perhaps their parts. Self begets self, parts beget parts, as you're saying. And I, like you said, and I hope we deepen it, that idea of us slowing down so that we can show up in as much self, because that's a game changer for us personally, but then in external relationships.
I think it is so helpful to remember and keep reminding ourselves that other people have parts too. So that even when somebody kind of does something that ouches me, I know it actually wasn't them. It was probably that part of them that did the ouch, or that, and so it can immediately help me bring more compassion to the connection. Although sometimes when it's a really powerful ouch, it's hard to remember. But
it doesn't condone the ouch. It just helps soften and have grace to what was going on in their system that potentially caused the ouch, right?
Well, it's like to stay in connection, to stay on, our goal is hopefully to stay in connection, because that's how we thrive as people, in connection to the other. Now, I'm not in any way saying that there isn't, sometimes it is much healthier to disengage any connection And that's definitely a choice. And sometimes we need to do that. But I think our protectors lead us to do that more often than we actually need to. And I do think our goal as a human race, if you will, is to figure out ways to stay in connection with each other whenever possible.
I love that because it does take me, like, if I zoom out and think of an eagle eye and the state of the world and the nation and etc., it's like we all just long, and going back to your intro again, it's like just longing for that community and that connection and just yearning to have meaningful depth of relationship to one another, and how so frequently what you just said just hit me is sometimes when we have a rupture and we are both meeting each other with protectors, we might be cutting those relationships off prematurely. And that's not to say, going back to what Amy just said and what you just said, that there may not be a time and a place for that. And being able to slow our own system down and understand what's going on with ourselves so we can make a really deliberate self-led choice in that, because relationships are such an important aspect of our lives. Prematurely cutting those off, without having done that process, can just further the wounds of those exiles and the loneliness and abandonment. And I don't know, my mind just like zoomed out and then zoomed back in really quick about just how relevant and important this topic is. Because again, we are all in relationship with one another, and that means there will be tension and there will be rupture. So you said a word earlier that we talk about, IFS word that we talk about pretty frequently, being unblending. So is that kind of like your first step, I guess, if we were going to like categorize rupture happening, as unblending number one?
Can I actually back up? And that's a really great question. But I know like in the IFS community, we're all so transcendent that we use words like rupture and repair. But Jory, will you actually just break it down for our listeners? Like, what does rupture even mean to those who are going to, like what's a rupture?
Yeah. So of course, in my mind, rupture is basically a loss of connection. And those can be little ouches, or they could be big conflicts. They can run the gamut. But just think of all those things that come up when you imagine rupture, having a rupture with somebody, having and all the things it brings up. It can bring up shame, it can bring up kind of disillusionment, and am I bad, and am I, it's
fear of abandonment. They're gonna leave me, right?
Yeah. And of course we all just we want to maintain those connections. And I think, Megan, the point I heard you saying before is it's natural. We all have them. Like, we cannot be in relationship without having rupture with each other. And as I said, I was minister for 20 years. I mean, I'm still a minister, but I was practicing for 20 years. And one of my favorite parts of the job, of course, was officiating weddings. And always before marrying a couple, I'd meet with them a couple times to get to know them, to craft the ceremony, to explore their relationship, and give my kind of ministerial wisdom, if you will, as they launch into this new phase of their relationship. So I'd always ask them, tell me about your worst fight, because I want to know, how do they rupture and how do they repair? Because it's such a key to a strong relationship. And it kind of didn't matter what they'd say, we'd kind of explore the topic, except when they said, oh, we never fight. We never fight. We never have a fight. It's like, something's wrong here, because of course we all fight and we all have arguments. And of course, if they're either in denial around that, or if it hasn't happened yet, then the relationship hasn't matured to the point where they know that, no, we know we can fight and we know we can repair it. And that's what I really used to like to explore with couples, is then, tell me about your worst fight, and then how'd you repair it? What are the tools of repair? And we go over that with them, of course. But we all have it, and we have to learn. And we aren't taught. We're never taught. We're never explicitly talk about how do you repair these ruptures. You think about kids who are getting in a fight over a toy, and Timmy grabbed it from Jenny and or pushed Jenny over, whatever it might be, and oh, Timmy, tell Jenny you're sorry, and that's how we repair. And of course, that's in no way how you repair. Jenny doesn't feel like that. I'm sorry, but that doesn't actually resolve anything. And one of the things I always like to talk about is the difference between apology and repair. And I don't know if it's a good time to talk about that at this point. But I'm seeing your heads nod.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I want you to go anywhere. You're the expert here with this. And I think what you're saying is really impactful and really powerful, because we weren't taught. So please teach us.
Yeah. Because we're taught that, oh, if you just say you're sorry, that then it's, you're done. But in fact, if we break down, what is an apology or saying I'm sorry, and I do want to say that it's not that repair doesn't involve apology, but an apology is never enough. And you think about what happens in apology. Well, I said I'm sorry. And so what happens in an apology is we're centering the person who's making the apology. I said I'm sorry. If I said I'm sorry, then kind of now it's done. I did my part. Let's, wash our hands. We're finished with this now because I said I'm sorry. So it's about me. If I caused the rupture, then I believe that me saying I'm sorry has finished the rupture, when in fact, it takes no accountability for what the impact was. And so, a repair much more looks at what the impact was. It centers the person for whom, the rupture was experienced. So if you just apologize, you're not acknowledging the hurt. You're often expecting forgiveness. Okay, I said I'm sorry. You're supposed to forgive me so we can move on now in our relationship. It's centering me and my needs. I just need to get on with our relationship. I said I'm sorry, we're done. Whereas a repair number one requires self-energy. You can't repair from a part, because parts have agendas. We know they're trying to fix it, bury it, get out of it, blame, shame, whatever they're trying to do, they have a strategy. We repair from self. And repairs centers the person who is impacted. So repair is actually going to look at, wow, I just did something, caused an ouch to you. Tell me about it. What was the impact? What happened for you? It definitely includes an apology around it. There needs to be some kind of remorse that, oh, wow, I did not mean for that impact to happen, and I can see that hurt. Wow, ouch, I'm so sorry. So it's not that sorry isn't in the repair. It doesn't necessarily require agreement around what happened. Like, I can hang on to what my own experience of that was, while also recognizing the hurt it caused you. So what I need to agree on or center was the impact I had. But I don't necessarily need to agree on the interpretation of necessarily what I did was wrong or not. But it did have an impact that I regret.
That's huge. I'm sorry to interrupt, sort of sorry to interrupt. Yeah. Notice that was a fake repair. That I think is so important, because I hear that so often where people, and I'm just saying people in relationship, because I don't think this is just exclusive to those in intimate partnerships, they get hung up in the weeds around agreeing on what happened.
Yes.
Right? Parts are like, no, this, no. And then the other one's like, yeah, no, but that's not. Where what I hear, and this I think has to be said again, so I'm going to do that, is agreeing on the impact of, oh, I could see how that could have felt for you. Yeah. Oh, I get that now.
I
Yeah.
want to hone you just a little bit,
Please.
because we don't want to imply that I can see how that felt for you, as in the for you is minimizing. Well, that's because you're so sensitive, or that's because that there needs to be a true remorse around, wow, I can see I had that impact.
Right. There you go.
I can see what I did had that impact on you.
Yeah.
And I can totally regret that. I can regret the impact. I never wanted to give that person the message that they don't belong here or don't fit in here. Well, I know that I may have needed to do that and would do it a second time, despite that I may think, wow, how could I recraft this to not? It doesn't necessarily, one of the keys about repair, and to really be able to successfully do it, we have to take care of those little exiles in us that believe, therefore, I'm bad. If I've caused an ouch, it means I'm bad, I'm no good, I'm terrible. We can't believe that if we're making a repair, because then we're just taking care of our, it's our own little ones that are trying to we're trying to placate or appease, or so we have to know that, okay, I'm not bad, I just blew it. And blowing, it's part of living and learning and growing and being in relationship. And we can own that. I can own I had a negative impact on you, that, oh, I so didn't want to give you that message that you're not valued here, or not a part of this, or something like that.
It kind of goes to show really how nuanced the language can be, to be able to be giving an apology, participating in a repair, and having the impact of the repair have exactly what you want, you want to be connected again, because even just slight little language like that can impact the nature of the repair. Whereas, I know Amy, and we've had rupture and repair, many times throughout our relationship, and those little words like that don't necessarily impact me, but for somebody they might. And so it kind of goes to show the nuance of each relationship, and how, I don't want to make this bigger and more complicated than it is, but how it's so important to slow down and take account of what exactly is going on for that specific person in that specific situation, like you just said. So taking care, I want to bring it full circle and backtrack to the initial question of a few minutes ago. Now that we've sort of discussed, what is a rupture, my understanding is that a rupture is, some level of disconnection, tension that's happened in a relationship, and that can happen on a huge spectrum. That can be, something that I would think would be small, but that might really, really impact another person, all the way up to some huge conflict in a marriage, or, whatever, in any realm of relationship. Amy made a good point. It does not just need to be an intimate or romantic partnership. And then a repair is a restoring of that connection, and apologizing is usually I want to say a good apology, but I don't know the better word or better terminology, is a way in which we get there. So what are the steps in getting ourselves to make I don't know, what are the steps in making our way to a good apology, or what's a better word for good apology?
Repair.
Right? Yeah, I guess.
I use repair with the couples I work with and the families I work with. I avoid the word apology, and I avoid the word forgiveness as well, which is another side conversation. But repair cannot kind of seek forgiveness or expect forgiveness. That repair is a process, and that somehow trust was broken, and it's a process to repair that connection, if you will. And so it can't just be, oh, I'm sorry, oh, you're forgiven, and sometimes you don't have to forgive. I definitely work with my clients who believe, oh, it's my responsibility to forgive. They apologize, so I should forgive. So what's wrong with me for not forgiving? And hang on a sec. This was a rupture, and it's a process to restore that connection. Can you trust again? Can you and even you don't have to forgive what happened. You can shift your relationship. You can go on with your relationship. And so for me, forgiveness isn't a particularly helpful concept, which is kind of awkward for a minister to say.
Sorry to interrupt, but that brings so much freedom, that lack of responsibility to forgive, and the freedom to know that we can go about this process of repair and our relationship can still stay intact throughout that process. And you saying that just really hit me about it just created such an expansive freedom and openness to know that like things can shift and they can mold, and it doesn't have to be this me versus you thing forever. It's a process, and there doesn't have to be such a staunch expectation of forgiveness of the person or the action or the situation, etc. I don't know, that just really hit me, so I just wanted to pinpoint that, so thank you for saying that.
Yeah, but I'll return to your initial question was, how do you do this now? And I will say, as Amy said previously, it really starts with that U-turn, the unblending. And because as I said, the repair has to come from self. So the first step is that U-turn internally, unblending, slowing way down, as you were saying, Megan, pausing, notice what's happening for me. Really getting curious around what parts are up here, listening to those parts, honoring them, reflecting back, validating them, so that they feel heard, so that they can give you enough space to make repair from self. And that all happens before you ever kind of initiate the repair, if you will. I have a good example of this I often use in my classes when I'm teaching this. It was a situation that happened not that long ago. I'm a little ashamed to say because I like to think better of myself at this point, but I was trying to get the freezer drawer open and it was jammed and I was very frustrated with it. And my wife came over and said, "Can I help?" And I snapped at her. I don't even remember what I said, but I just like chewed her head off as I'm still kind of wrestling with this drawer. And she, was definitely taken aback and sulks away, which is what her protectors did. She experienced the ouch and had to go and take care of herself by retreating from my harsh snapping part. And I'm still wrestling with the drawer as I'm actually doing my little U-turn. So I'm just taking this, oh my gosh, because I realized as soon as I did it, and I just started to get curious around who on earth just chopped my wife's head off for coming over and say, "Can I help you?" And I heard this part come back saying, "She called you stupid." And again, I just got curious internally. And no, she didn't. She came over and said, "Can I help you?" And my part said, "Yeah, that's calling you stupid." So again, and this is taking seconds internally, thanks to the fact that I've done a lot of IFS work. But I realized this is a real young one that said, "She just called you stupid." And then I all of a sudden it flashed to the scenes of my brother, who, was one of my main tormentors as a child, who would always come over and, "Oh, can I help you? You are so stupid. You can't do anything right. You are such an idiot. Let me help you. You are just such a," and so for me, that phrase, "Can I help you?" like internally, some little exile heard as "you're so stupid." And so I just, it softened internally. I reminded my part that my wife is not my brother, and that actually I'm not stupid, and I know this. My part calmed down, and I checked for, my own open heartedness. And then I was able to return to my wife and say, I am so sorry. I realized I just chopped your head off when you came over to offer help. And so that happens, that whole U-turn, which IFS has taught us how to do so well, and I must say is not easy. It takes a lot of practice to learn from those parts, is the first thing you have to do before you ever initiate a repair, because repair has to come from self. So if you're in the place of self, and I will say I work a lot with my clients on how to make repairs. They've had some rupture in their life and they want to work on how to make repair. And we will sometimes spend months working with all the parts that are coming up with for them around this rupture to really get to, the bottom. Who is it protecting? Who are those protectors protecting? So that when they go to make a repair, they can really make it from self. And it's not easy work. I recognize that. And it takes a lot of, and I think if I hadn't have done so much healing work with my little one, that it knows it's okay and it's not stupid, I wouldn't have been able to recover so quickly. So just to honor, this can take a while, and particularly when we're working with our clients and teaching them how to do this. But if they're, go ahead, Megan, did you want to ask something?
Yeah, just a quick little interjection is thank you for sharing like such a real life example, right? Because I think as we're talking about process and using some of the language of repair and things, we made the point of this is a spectrum, sometimes big, sometimes small, and that is such a real life example, fighting with the freezer drawer that happens, and we respond and react, sometimes out of our parts, and it does bring back that hope that Amy was talking about, that it can be quick too, those little little ruptures can be repaired quickly as long as we are checking in with ourselves. So I just wanted to thank you for bringing this into real life, because we can go as big of a topic as the long term, and it doesn't have to be a big thing like this, but the long-term repair process that like cheating can bring, in a relationship. But it could be a small rupture like snapping at your wife or your spouse while you're fighting, with the freezer drawer, like can't decide on where to go eat, or something like that. So I love that you brought that into the day-to-day.
Well, and what stood out for me with that too is, again, the process of this, but the process begins with the U-turn. And I also heard you even, Jory, doing some repair, if you will, with your littles inside, right? Like in IFS, we call it updating, but that updating is a corrective experience for them, which in theory is a bit of a pre-repair almost. So that self can emerge and show up and do the external repair. Right?
Totally. Yeah. And I love, it's the internal, outternal, that we're constantly doing in this model to really taking care of our internal relationships so we can be with somebody in the external relationships. Yeah. Very true.
Okay. So you were saying, so then you got self online, and you don't have to continue your example personally unless you want to, but so you get self online.
That's fine. No.
And then you're like, okay, I feel ready to repair externally.
Yep. So the steps for repair are check and sure, make sure you're in self, and then ask to hear more. It's really that getting curious, self energy. We know it's curious, compassionate, all those things, calm, connected. Like that's what you're doing. You're approaching them from self and say, tell me more. I realized I just did something and I saw you react in a certain way. And I'm worried that might have, caused some hurt, or I'm not sure how it landed. Can you tell me more? What happened for you when I did that? And so I'm going to hear from my wife what it was like when I snapped at her when she just came to offer help. And I'm going to, hopefully my heart's going to grow bigger as I hear the impact that I had. And I'm going to reflect that impact, and I'm going to, validate it. Wow, I so didn't mean for that to happen. And oh, I can hear how just coming up and offering help and having it, deterred, and, for her, it kind of sent her to that place of, gee, I'm no good. Nobody wants me to help out, and it's like, oh no, that's the last message I ever wanted to give my wife. Of course I want her helping me out. And then being accountable for your behavior. You get to be responsible. And so, like, last thing I want to do is to give you the message that I don't value your help or value you, or think you're smart enough to help me or whatever it is. Like I so have snapped at you that way when you were just trying to be generous and offering to help me with a drawer. Of course you can help. Like, I need you in my life. I need your help in my life. And make a commitment to be different moving forward. If it's empty of any kind of I recognize I got to work on my own little ones that still can react and hear my brother's voice in my head. That's my job, because I do never want to give you the message that I don't want your help or you around me when I'm struggling with stuff. So, that's kind of the anatomy of the repair. To Go ahead, Amy.
Well, in that anatomy of the repair, I'm wondering, and I kind of know the answer. Part of me needs to tell everyone, I know the answer to this, but I want Jory to say it, is, are we assessing for the person we're in external relationships, readiness, openness, and like, what if they don't, cool, we're self-led and we're ready for repair, but they're like, I don't want to talk about it.
Right. So it is totally up to them. Of course, the person who experienced the rupture has the choice of whether to receive your attempt at a repair or not. Because, of course, they might have they might have like been doing this work with people dissing them or not recognizing, their human. I'm particularly thinking of microaggressions that are like, oh, they might be little. And of course, I say that with quotes because they're not necessarily little, but they're often just, the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of those little scratches and ouches that build up again and again. And the last thing they want to do is to explain to somebody or have to do the hard work of them doing their repair work on me. I've had enough of that. I don't need to be in here for that again. And they don't have to. It's totally up to them. And if my wife is not open to hearing my repair, she's still, licking her wounds or fuming. Like, that's not the time to be making a repair. She's got to be open for it. So, the first thing you do is to check in. And whoa, I can appreciate, I just did something here. Are you available? Because I really want to hear what the impact was on you. Because I care about you. Are you available to share that with me? And if they say no, I got to accept that. It is on their timetable, not mine, if I'm the one who caused the rupture.
Well, because then it goes back to that centering, as you mentioned earlier, about the centering being on the one apologizing or repairing, right? Mm-hmm. And a real repair isn't contingent on my timeline. It's upon the person system who I hurt, right?
Yep.
Now, my next question for you, Jory, is this. So I love the anatomy of a repair. And that's like the anatomy of a lovely repair gone right. Mm-hmm. What happens when you're repairing and then parts show up in the repair? Because, right? See where I'm going with this, right?
They do.
So,
they do. Again, I work a lot with couples. So it's always okay to take a time out, and either side gets to call a timeout at any point. This isn't working for me. We're gonna have to pause now and come back to this because it's not working for me, and that can come from either side. I do say sometimes, and one of the ways I work a lot with my clients is beginning repairs on paper, whether you actually deliver it on paper or not. But practice writing it out. And I used to do this all the time when I tried to make a repair, is I'd write it out and then I'd read it and think, okay, what parts are showing up here? And try to edit out the parts till it really feels self-led. And I also have my clients practice with me so that I'm the person they're trying to make repair with and I can tell them how it's landing. But yeah, often it doesn't go right. And sometimes we need to even repair the attempts at a repair.
Yeah.
And again, that's kind of what it's like to be in a relationship.
Yeah, I mean, it can be messy, and Amy, thank you so much for bringing that up because it was kind of going through my mind is like we can center ourselves in self and be self-led, but not self-centered, if that makes any sense. While you're entering into looking toward a repair with someone, hopefully, whatever the circumstance, you guys are both meeting each other with that readiness. And then maybe something comes up or they say that word or whatever that triggers that, those that's a real life kind of conversation can be messy, because our stuff, continues to come up. So I that's real. It's not always like we're sitting down with hands on each other's hearts and kumbayaing and we sing afterwards. It can really, you can get triggered in the middle of it too. And it's okay, Jory, being self-led, to give yourself permission to say hey, can we take 5? Let's return to this. And I've always heard that let's make sure that if we take a timeout, make sure that you're specific about when you're going to, revisit, not even the conversation, but revisit one another about the conflict, even if it's to say, hey, I need 10 more, 10 more minutes or something, just being really clear there.
Yeah. And, I like what you said, Megan, relationships are messy. And as I said earlier, repair is a process. So yes, there's going to be bumps along the way as you attempt to do this. I do want to say a few things that repair is not. Repair is not making excuses. If you want to add a but, I'm sorry I did this, but, I had to because of, or I did it. Leave the excuse off, even if you did have to because of. There's no reason to make an excuse in a repair. So no ifs or buts. It's not about expecting forgiveness. I have to be willing, and I do say this to my clients all the time. Before they attempt to repair, I want you to imagine the absolute worst response the person could have of you initiating this repair. And then we practice that and we prepare them for that. And if their parts and their systems are totally fine with whatever the response may be, even the worst possible response, then they are ready to make the repair. You can't go into it thinking, okay, I did my part, now where's yours? Because we do know, yes, it takes 2 to tango in most of everything, and there's always 2 sides of a coin. Yes, we all know that, but to initiate a repair is not about that. I have to go in knowing I am going to own my part of this, whether they can own their part or not. And I don't care whether they can accept it or not, whether they're available for it or not. For me and my system, I need to be able to offer it. And so I'm not expecting anything in return. I'm not expecting forgiveness. And I'm also aware it doesn't mean I'm bad. It doesn't mean I'm bad. It doesn't even necessarily mean I did something wrong. I may have done something wrong. Definitely the impact I had, I can regret. But it might not be admitting that I'm wrong. It's just the impact had some, really unintended impact that I definitely can feel bad about the impact. So, Yeah,
It's
go
that
ahead, Megan.
just that last portion, we had, I mean, obviously Brene Brown's work is, many years in the making, but we just did an episode fairly recently on shame, and it's very much that like shame versus guilt. Like
Yeah,
I did something bad versus I am something bad. So I just wanted to bring that kind of back into the conversation, being that
totally.
many of our parts carry that shame, and that can
Yes.
get triggered in all sorts of different ways.
Yeah, yeah. So I'd like to, if the two of you are open to it, lead you in a little bit of a exercise, guided meditation to allow you to experience this a little bit if you're open to it.
Love it.
Sure are.
Yeah. Okay. So I invite all your listeners to join in as well. So I want to take you on a little journey internally. And I want you to find an experience where you have parts that feel as if you deserve an apology. There's been some rupture that somebody caused, that somebody did something, and it has not yet been repaired. And I invite you to bring that person, that situation to mind. And think about what they did and how it impacted you. Just notice what parts are coming up for you regarding this rupture. Now, for the next few minutes, I'm going to enact various attempts at a repair. And after each offering, I want to invite you to consider, and feel free to journal if you want, what you're noticing in your own personal system. Any thoughts, feelings, body sensations in response to that attempt at a repair. So I want to invite you to imagine what I'm voicing is what that person who caused the rupture might say to you in their attempt at an apology or repair. So here's the first one. Imagine that person coming to you and saying, well, it wasn't really my fault. I mean, you made me do it. If you hadn't done what you did, I wouldn't have had to have. Just notice what's happening for you in your own system. Any parts reacting, thoughts, feelings, body sensations, impulses for response. Now imagine that person coming to you and saying the following. Well, you're not really getting it. Let me explain to you what really happened. If you just try to think about it from another perspective, you'll just see just notice what's happening for you. Any thoughts, feelings, body sensations, impulses for response. Now imagine the person coming with the following attempt at a repair. Oh, you are so right. I am just a terrible person. That was awful of me, and you should never forgive me. I am so bad. Notice what's happening for you. Any thoughts, feelings, body sensations, impulses for repair? And finally, imagine the person coming to you with the following attempt at an apology or repair. Tell me more. I really want to get this. I need and want to look at my piece of this. I am so sorry. I commit to paying attention to this so I do better. This relationship is important to me. So I'm going to work on this. Notice what's happening. Any thoughts, feelings, body sensations, impulses for response? Well, maybe as I invite you out of this, just check in and see if there's anything in your system that needs to happen or any intentions you want to set with any of these parts you noticed in just doing this little exercise. I'm curious how that was for each of you.
Oh, I have all the parts I can talk about for each. So for the first two, it was interesting. I don't know, interesting, maybe just it just was. The first two, I had very similar parts, impulses and feelings that came up. I have a part of myself that is known as the lumberjack that like wants to like chop people down when activated and when it feels like that little one feels invisible, unheard, not seen, not understood. Like you're not getting it. Who like wants to like make sure they get it. That was a big response for me for the first two. Not awesome repairs, my system wants to say. And then for the third option, I noticed almost a shutdown in my system that was paired with a feeling of disgust of like, ew, don't like, this sort of thing you're doing of saying, poor me, I'm so sorry, I'm so bad. So I had like a shutdown kind of disgust parts showing up. And then the last one, my first, was like a shock. I noticed like a shock in my system, like, what? Followed by this like openness, warmth, and expansion, like a spaciousness. Yeah, so that's what showed up for me.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Amy.
Yeah.
Mine was pretty similar. I had, my disgust kind of like really defensive protector energy came on with the first two, whereas the third one I have so much familial experience with that I I like almost got angry mixed with like just all those little childhood exiles that just remember, being responded to in that way a lot. Wow, which was paired, I was so happy that you did that one and then the like actual repair next because there was such a juxtaposition of my emotions and feelings and sensations in my body. And I mean, obviously we're on audio only, but I like really got into that. So you might have seen like my lips curl and like my facial expressions through it. But that third one, the calm openness that Amy just talked about, it genuinely, as you've been talking about it throughout the episode, that genuinely felt like an attempt to remain connected. And the difference there between those four. Like, thank you so much for doing that, because it does exemplify so well what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, really, really powerful. The language, energy behind, and the way in which, it exemplifies how we approach things can make such a different impact in this game.
Yeah. And, I will say that third one that, I noticed the strong reaction to, definitely. But you can even hear, if you hear it, oh, you're so right. I'm just a terrible person. That was so awful of me. You should never forgive me. I am so bad. We can hear them blended with their little exile, right? But we can also hear how they're centering themselves. Even though they're saying, you're right, I'm terrible, it's still centering themselves. And of course, a true repair is going to center the person for whom it had the impact. So, of course, it feels yucky.
So I'm hearing like they're exiles, but I'm also, for my system, I'm hearing like this victim-y protector blending in there too. I'm like,
Yeah. It's definitely a protector saying, if I say that I'm so bad, then maybe you won't think I'm so bad. Yeah.
Or maybe then you'll validate for me. No, you're not so bad. No.
Right. You'll make my heart feels terrible, feel better by switching and taking care of me. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Bait and switch.
Yeah, that like bait and switch, so like rescuing. It's interesting because the first three have such an attempt to control in different ways their own experience. And I think we've all probably apologized in that way, and on some, spectrum or level to some degree in our lives. But the attempts for our system and protectors to continue to protect and control the situation and protect and control us in the first three, whereas that last one with the real repair of just like that word you said, Amy, that just the openness. It's so it's like the contrast is just so there. So I hope that our listeners, whether you did it right now or whether you have to come back to it when you have a relevant experience, I hope that you do that exercise, because I mean, I didn't even have any huge, massive, situation that I'm not in the middle of a huge repair, but even the situation that I had in my mind's eye, that was incredibly impactful. So thank you, Jory, for walking us through that. Because,
Well, and it shows what not to do a bit. And then it also, the last, the D scenario, the fourth scenario, also, I think gives a lovely pseudo script of sorts of how to begin the repair, right? Okay, something landed. I get the vibe something's not cool, and that I may have done something that was hurtful. Tell me more. Right?
I will say, when I do this exercise in my trainings, the second half of it is I send the participants off imagining a time they created a rupture where they would like to make a repair, and then I ask them to practice that with a partner. And so you can take this all as your homework assignment to maybe do that. Find somebody, or even a piece of paper, which is how I often do my practices of repairs, is just write it out until it really feels self-led. But remembering that before you do this, you need to unblend from your parts so that it's really coming from self.
Yeah.
That, you approach the post being open to hearing more, really learning about the impact, hearing it, understanding it, reflecting what you're hearing so that they can feel heard, then being accountable for your behavior and making a commitment to be different moving forward. Be changed for the experience.
Yeah, really being open-hearted to the impact, not what your intention was, but the impact that your parts had on the other person.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to recap really quick. So what we've talked about in the last hour, we are all in relationship with one another. Rupture will happen on whatever spectrum that is. It can be small ouches, it can be big ouches. Small ouches over time can turn into big ouches. We all have the choice in which we move forward in relationship with one another. However, to do that the most effectively, you got to make the U-turn. You got to make the U-turn first and then move forward with the repair in whatever capacity that is, whether you're being repaired with or you're actually making and, trying to, repair on your side. And there are awesome people in the world, hope merchants. I was like, Jory is really like a stewardess of hope in relationship and how you can move forward in relationship and that things don't have to be so black and white. So thank you for being that, Jory, and giving us like hope and
repair is a
freedom.
process. I'm sorry to interrupt.
And repair is a process.
Repair is a process.
Repair is a process. So that's kind of like, I'm going to like container all of the beauty that you've given us in this episode, because it is really, really relevant for every single person listening, for all three of us, and for hopefully any new listeners that may tune in moving forward.
Yeah.
Jory, before we kind of get into closing, is there anything else that you want to put into that container and recap, or anything that you haven't mentioned that you think is relevant for repair?
I think we've touched on it all. Just finding a lot of compassion for yourself through this process, because I don't want to minimize how challenging it can be. I think it's one of the hardest things we do is kind of staying in relationship and in connection with folks. It's easy to kind of give up, quit, pull into a shell or whatever, but really doing the hard work of repair, it is hard work. And so I don't want to minimize that. And yeah. But I do like that idea of being a hope merchant. I do believe in the hope and the power and the ability to create repair, even across some of the greatest chasms.
Yeah, there's always opportunity there, hopefully. Joy, I can't recall. I want to ask about, your Spotify song and things like that, but do you have social media? Do you have anywhere that people can find you, or any projects you're working on that you want to shout out? I don't know what's going on in your world.
I don't. I'm not a big social media person, and my focus right now is a lot on providing trainings in IFS. So that's kind of been my gig these days.
Not everybody does, so no worries there. And thank you for your work with IFS and continuing to educate folks, because you're a really good person to do that. The Turning In podcast has a shared Spotify playlist that we like to add guests, songs, things that you've been jamming and jiving to, whether it be recently or maybe like your all-time faves. Do you have any songs that you'd like us to add to that, and that our listeners can connect to you when they listen?
Oh, I would probably suggest Brave by Sarah Bareilles, because I do think you need to be pretty brave to do this work of staying in relationship with one another and all of our differences. So I'd recommend that one.
We'll get it on there. We will add it today. Okay. Jory, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate this conversation, and I hope that our listeners do as well. Your time is of the essence, and I definitely appreciate you spending it with us. That goes for you, Jory, and for anybody that's tuning in. So anybody that has tuned in, I hope that you enjoyed, and we will see you on our next episode. Thanks so much.